Okay, so the purpose of this screencast is to review the rubric for the limiting reactant lab so you can understand clearly what my expectations are for this lab report. So as you're watching this screencast, you should have that rubric open. I'm going to refer back to it as we move through this. Okay, so before we begin, just talk about the general purpose of why do we write lab reports. The purpose of a lab report is to state the purpose of the experiment and communicate the results of those experiments. And so that includes what data you collected and what calculations you've done in relation to the purpose of the lab. And then the final purpose of a lab report is to analyze the quality of those results, identify sources of error, and propose improvements for the next experiment. Okay, so a couple things, first of all, that we want to make sure that we include in the lab report. And so this is just general information that you should include in all lab reports. You make sure you have your name on it. You want to have a title. You want to state the date in which the experiment was run. State who your lab partner was. And in this case, because you've pooled data, state the name of the students who you shared data with. Okay, so the overall sections of the lab report, you're going to have one section which is just stating the objective of the lab. You're going to get that right from the lab procedure. And for this lab, guys, we're focusing on those first two objectives that are listed in the lab procedure. You want to have a data section, which is going to include your data table and observations. You want to show any calculations that are relevant to the objective of the lab, and we're going to talk about the rubric in a minute. And then finally, there's going to be 3 sections to your conclusion. You're going to summarize the results of your lab, identify reasonable sources of error, and then propose practical improvements. So we'll talk about that in more detail. Okay, so the first section is going to, after you've sort of got your title and stated your objective, is the data section. And so this should be pretty clear in terms of what my expectations are at this point. But you're going to have a well-organized data table. Make sure you're including all the relevant data and nothing that's unimportant. The way to decide what data is relevant and what isn't is what data you used in your calculations. If you find after you've done your calculations that you haven't used data that you've collected for those calculations, it was probably not important, and so you want to eliminate that from your data table. Okay. Make sure you record all your measurements to the proper level of precision based on the equipment you've used. You want to make sure your headers contain both that descriptor, the units, and include uncertainties as well. And make sure that you include observations that are useful and things that you'd want to talk about in the conclusion. I want you, in addition, for this particular lab, make sure it's clear which trials are the ones that you and your lab partner ran versus those that you got from another group. And a common mistake that I continue to see is units in the body of the data table. Please avoid doing that in this section. Okay, so this section will be worth 6 points. Calculations are going to be worth 14 points. Okay. Keys guy here is make sure, hold on, let me get my pen working. I just need to see sample calculations, guys. So pick one trial to do the calculations for, and just show it for that one. You can summarize the results for the other trials in your results table. Okay. What I'm looking for here, guys, is first of all that all the calculations lead to the objective of the lab. And so remember, for this lab, you needed to calculate theoretical yield and actual yield, as well as percent yield. So all calculations that you would need to do to be able to determine those 3 values. You want to lay it out logically. Make sure you're rounding to the proper level of precision, using units, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so of these points, a significant number is going to be how you format it. So don't be messy in this process. Make sure it's easy to follow. And then make sure you're also including that results table to summarize your results. Okay. As part of the calculations, guys, you're going to want to make sure that you note that we didn't use calcium chloride, we used calcium chloride dihydrate as our source of calcium chloride. So in terms of calculations, how is this going to affect your results? Well, if you're trying to determine how much of your product you could make from this, you would set it up like this: 1 gram of CaCl2, 2H2O, and then you would convert grams to 1 moles of that. Okay. And then we know that for every 1 mole of CaCl2 dihydrate, I'm going to get 1 mole of CaCl2. Okay, so just a little extra step here that you're going to want to do to do the calculations for theoretical yield. The molar mass that you're going to use here, guys, is going to be the molar mass of your dihydrate. Okay, so if you did the pre-lab calculations, you probably just did it for CaCl2. You're just going to modify those calculations to do it this way. Hopefully that is clear. Okay, so now finally we're on the conclusion here. For the conclusion, I'm looking for 3 paragraphs. Okay, paragraph 1, I want you to answer the questions in the objective and support with evidence and reasoning. So I want you to tell me what's your theoretical yield, what's your actual yield, what's your percent yield, and talk through in general how you came about getting those values. Okay, this doesn't need to be a very wordy paragraph, but it does kind of need to sort of summarize how you know what those 3 values are. Okay. Second paragraph is really focusing on why did you not get 100% yield in your procedure. Okay, so we did an example sources of error paragraph when we were talking about the hydrate lab. Essentially, you're looking to do the same thing in this paragraph here. So I'm looking for you to identify a reasonable source of error. I'm looking for you to support it with evidence, like observations that you made in the lab, and I'm looking for you to tie the 2 together with some reasoning. Okay. Now the third paragraph, and this isn't going to be worth many points at all, guys, but I want you to take a stab at trying to propose some changes to the lab that would correct the mistakes that you identified in paragraph 2. We haven't really practiced this. I'm just going to try to throw you in and see how you do on this. Once again, not a lot of points here, but I just want to see how you're doing on that final paragraph. Okay, there's one final section in the rubric that you're going to notice called communication. And really what this is, guys, is the formatting. Okay, did you lay things out neatly, sequentially, in a logical fashion that was easy to understand? Were you neat, legible, all that good stuff? So that's what these 4 points capture. Okay, that in a nutshell is sort of what I'm looking for this lab report. You are going to do this individually. You're going to submit it on turnitin.com. It's going to be due next Friday. Okay, so you still have a week, and I'll be back from my trip by then, so you can ask additional questions on this formatting. But hopefully this screencast is enough to sort of get you started in terms of writing the lab report. If you're struggling with the calculations, talk to each other on that, but please understand that this is an individual assessment, and you need to do it individually, no plagiarism in this lab report in any way. Okay, so that's all I got. Go ahead and get started on writing your lab report. Let's go ahead and stop there.